In the summer of 1996, a young couple drove into the Blue Ridge Mountains for their anniversary trip. They never came back. But the disposable camera in Michael Hayes' briefcase captured something that would take the FBI 28 years to discover. Evidence of a killer nobody knew existed. June 22, 1996, Richmond, Virginia. Sarah and Michael Hayes loaded their green Ford Explorer outside their Carytown apartment. Third wedding anniversary, 10 days off work, a road trip through the Blue Ridge Parkway to Asheville. Michael worked at a Richmond architectural firm. Sarah was a nurse at MCV Hospital Pediatric Ward. They'd been planning this trip for months. It saved specifically for it. Even bought a new Polaroid camera to go with their old Nikon. Their landlord, Mr. Peterson, helped them load the cooler. "Drive safe," he said, watching them pull away. "Those mountain roads can be tricky." Sarah laughed, promised they'd send a postcard from North Carolina. They never sent that postcard. They never made it to North Carolina. And for 28 years, nobody knew what happened after they stopped for gas in Waynesboro, Virginia, at 2:47 p.m. on June 23rd. The Texaco receipt was still in Michael's wallet when the FBI found it in 2024, tucked inside a briefcase that had been sitting in evidence since the original missing persons report. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a couple's anniversary trip became one of Virginia's most disturbing cold cases. The first day went exactly as planned. They drove south on Route 29, stopped at Monticello, took the tour, had lunch in Charlottesville. The credit card records show a charge at the hardware store restaurant, $34.67, timestamp 1:15 p.m. The waiter remembered them because Sarah was wearing scrubs. She'd come straight from a night shift. They seemed happy, he said later, tired but happy, sharing a dessert, looking at a road map together. Normal couple stuff. Nothing worth remembering except it was the last normal moment of their lives. They entered Shenandoah National Park through the Rockfish Gap entrance at 3:30 p.m. The ranger who checked their pass was Dennis Crenshaw, a veteran who'd worked the park for 15 years. He remembered them specifically because Michael asked about scenic overlooks good for sunset photos. Crenshaw suggested Raven's Roost, Humpback Rocks, or if they wanted something less crowded, the old fire road near Crabtree Falls. "Most tourists don't know about it," he'd said, "but photographers love it. You can see 3 states from up there." Sarah had thanked him, mentioned they were celebrating their anniversary. Crenshaw wished them well, watched them drive into the park. But here's what changes everything about this case. The Dennis Crenshaw who checked them in, who gave them directions, who wished them a happy anniversary, had been dead for 3 months. The real Dennis Crenshaw had a heart attack in March 1996, died at Augusta Medical Center, buried in Waynesboro Cemetery. The man wearing his uniform, using his name badge, working his shift was someone else entirely. And nobody at the park noticed because the imposter looked similar enough. Middle-aged, graying beard, slight paunch. He knew the park, knew the procedures, knew exactly what to say. He'd been Dennis Crenshaw for 3 months, and he was very good at it. The Hayes couple drove the Blue Ridge Parkway, that famous scenic highway that runs along the mountain ridges. They stopped at the overlooks, took photos with their Nikon. Other tourists remembered seeing them, young couple with Virginia plates, the woman with short red hair, the man tall and lanky, always checking his map. At 6:30 p.m., they bought snacks at the Peaks of Otter Lodge. The receipt shows 2 Cokes, trail mix, a Blue Ridge Parkway souvenir keychain. The clerk, Amy Morrison, said they asked about camping spots. She suggested the Peaks of Otter campground, but they wanted something more remote, more private for their anniversary. She understood, pointed them toward Irish Creek Valley, mentioned an old Forest Service road that led to primitive camping spots. "Beautiful area," she said, "but no facilities, no cell service. They'd need to be self-sufficient." That was the last confirmed sighting of Sarah and Michael Hayes alive. Their families didn't panic immediately. The couple was supposed to call from Asheville on June 30th. But when they didn't, Michael's mother assumed they were having too much fun to check in. But when they didn't return to Richmond on July 2nd, didn't show up for work on July 3rd, the worry became, fear became police reports. The search started July 4th, ironically Independence Day, focused on their known route along the Blue Ridge Parkway. Park rangers, state police, search and rescue teams, volunteer groups. They searched for 2 weeks. They found nothing. No Ford Explorer, no camping gear, no sign the couple had even left the main parkway. Detective Janet Ross from the Virginia State Police drove the entire route herself, stopped at every business, every campground, every scenic overlook. After Peaks of Otter Lodge, it was like they'd vanished into the mountain mist. The case went cold by September. Ross filed it as probable accident. Maybe they'd driven off one of those winding mountain roads in the dark. Wouldn't be found until hunters stumbled across the wreck years later. But something bothered Ross about the case. The fake Dennis Crenshaw had filed a very detailed report about seeing the Hayes couple. Too detailed. He knew Sarah was wearing turquoise earrings, mentioned Michael's University of Virginia class ring, noted the exact model of their Nikon camera. Details a gate ranger wouldn't remember from a 2-minute interaction. When Ross tried to follow up with Crenshaw in August, she learned he'd quit suddenly. Family emergency, his resignation letter said. Moving to Florida to care for his sick mother. No forwarding address, last paycheck sent to a P.O. box that was closed a week later. The fake Crenshaw disappeared completely. But he'd made one mistake. He'd been photographed at a Park Service training day in May 1996, 2 months after the real Crenshaw died. Group photo, 30 Rangers, fake Crenshaw in the back row, partially hidden, but there. The photo sat in a file for 28 years until the FBI's new facial recognition system flagged it in 2024. The match came back as Robert Eugene Fulton, discharged from the Marines in 1991 for psychological reasons, arrested twice for stalking in California, disappeared after jumping bail in 1995. His military psych evaluation was chilling: antisocial personality disorder, obsessive tendencies, fixation on couples and families. He'd been stationed at Quantico, knew Virginia well, had survival training that would let him live off-grid indefinitely. The FBI now had a name, but Fulton had been a ghost for almost 30 years. Here's where the story takes its darkest turn. In 2024, the FBI's Cold Case Task Force was digitizing evidence from pre-2000 missing persons cases. An analyst named Derek Chen was processing the Hayes evidence when he found Michael's briefcase, collected from their apartment in 1996. Inside, along with work papers and business cards, was a disposable camera. Kodak FunSaver, 27 exposures, still wound to frame 24. Everyone had assumed it was from before the trip, probably forgotten in the briefcase. But Chen noticed the date stamp on the camera's cardboard cover, June 1996. This was purchased for the trip. Developing 28-year-old film from a disposable camera is delicate work. The FBI lab used chemical stabilizers, controlled temperatures, digital enhancement. They recovered 24 images. The first 15 were exactly what you'd expect. Tourist photos along the Blue Ridge Parkway, Sarah and Michael at overlooks, sunset through trees, the classic vacation shots. But frame 16 changed everything. The photo showed a cabin, old, weathered, definitely not a park facility. Frame 17, Michael standing by the cabin door, but something's wrong. His smile is forced, his posture tense. Frame 18, interior shot, rustic furniture, mounted deer heads, a wall covered with Polaroid photos. Frame 19, Sarah sitting at a wooden table, but she's not looking at the camera, she's looking at something off frame, her expression worried. Frame 20 through 23, more interior shots focusing on details. A ranger uniform hanging on a hook, maps spread on a table, a collection of car keys on a nail by the door. Frame 24 was the last photo. It showed Sarah's face close up, tears visible on her cheeks, and in the reflection of her eyes, enhanced by FBI techs, you could see the person taking the photo. A man in a ranger uniform, but his face partially visible, enough for facial recognition. Robert Eugene Fulton, the fake Dennis Crenshaw, the man who'd given them directions to their death. The FBI traced the cabin through architectural analysis and old forestry records. It had belonged to a moonshiner named Clement Wade, who died in 1987. The property was so remote it was never properly cataloged, just abandoned to the forest. Located 7 miles from the Irish Creek Valley Road, accessible only by an overgrown logging trail, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. And Fulton, living as Dennis Crenshaw, had found it, used it, made it his killing ground. The search of the property in November 2024 revealed horrors. In a root cellar behind the cabin, investigators found remains. Not just the Hayes couple, but 6 other victims, all couples, all from between 1996 and 1998. Their vehicles had been disassembled, parts scattered across 3 states, some sold to junkyards, some dumped in rivers. Fulton had been methodical, careful, but he'd kept trophies, jewelry, wallets, and hundreds of Polaroid photos showing victims in their final days. The Hayes couple had been kept for 4 days. The disposable camera showed they were forced to pose for anniversary photos while Fulton watched. At some point, Michael had managed to take those final frames when Fulton was distracted, probably hoping someone would find them. It just took 28 years for someone to look, but Fulton himself was gone. After leaving Shenandoah in 1996, he'd assumed another identity, Thomas Garrett, a park maintenance worker in the Ozarks. When that got too hot in 1999, he became William Stone in the Cascade Mountains, always parks, always remote, always around tourists. The FBI tracked 5 more identities, 12 more missing couples potentially linked to him. Then the trail went cold in 2008 when William Stone supposedly died in a wilderness accident in Alaska. Body never recovered, just gear found near a glacier. Except in 2024, after Fulton's photo went public, a tip came in from British Columbia. A hermit matching his description had been seen near Revelstoke, living in an abandoned ranger station. Canadian Mounties and FBI agents surrounded the station at dawn on December 15, 2024. They found Fulton, 71 years old, surrounded by his trophies. Thousands of photos, dozens of IDs, detailed journals documenting 37 murders across 3 decades. He didn't resist, didn't run, just sat there as they cuffed him. "I knew you'd find that camera eventually," he said. "I kept waiting for someone to develop it." The trial was brief. Fulton pleaded guilty to avoid extradition complications, got life without parole. Families finally had answers, bodies to bury, closure of a sort. Sarah and Michael Hayes were laid to rest in Richmond, their headstone reading "Together Forever," with the date of their anniversary, not their death. The disposable camera that solved their murder is now in the FBI Museum, a reminder that evidence waits patiently in evidence lockers, in forgotten briefcases, in undeveloped film. The Blue Ridge Parkway remains one of America's most scenic drives. Millions travel it every year, stop at the same overlooks, take the same photos. The peaks of Otter Lodge still serves hikers and tourists. Irish Creek Valley is still remote and beautiful. There's no memorial to the victims, no marker where the cabin stood. The forest has reclaimed it, as forests do. Only a few FBI agents know the exact location, and they're not telling. Some places are better forgotten, but park services nationwide changed their protocols after the Fulton case. Background checks, fingerprinting, regular ID verification, photo IDs that are harder to fake. They learned that a uniform and a confident manner aren't enough, that predators can hide in plain sight, that sometimes the person giving you directions is directing you to your death. The Hayes case proved that the most dangerous moment isn't when you meet a killer. It's when you trust someone simply because they wear a badge. And somewhere in evidence, lockers across the country, there are more undeveloped cameras, more forgotten films, more answers waiting 20 or 30 or 40 years to be discovered. The FBI has a team now dedicated to processing old film from cold cases. Every frame could be the one that solves a murder, identifies a killer, brings a family peace. They've solved 3 more cases since the Hayes discovery, all from film nobody thought to develop for decades. The real tragedy isn't just that Sarah and Michael Hayes died on their anniversary trip. It's that they documented their killer, captured evidence that could have caught him in 1996. But nobody looked. The camera sat in a briefcase in an evidence room while Fulton killed again and again. Technology had to catch up to the evidence. Facial recognition had to be invented. The FBI had to create a cold case task force. Justice took 28 years, but it finally developed.